Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday to everyone in the room. How are we feeling this morning, guys?
Yeah, feeling great. Feeling great, Jeff. Thank you.
Couldn't be better here. So excited for this conversation. Looking forward to diving in. January 13th, 2023, we made it. And, another beautiful day to be alive. Eric, pleasure to have you on the show. And who's ever tuning in, feel free to drop some questions, drop some comments in the chat. And good morning to everybody.
Yeah, it's crazy. We made it to, what is that, episode 13 now? We're rolling right along. Once you get past
on the 13th.
That's right. Take that first step. In that journey, you can take anything on. There's no goal that's unachievable, right? Tremendous episode this morning that we have for you. We'll dive in a little bit about our guest this morning, Eric. A tremendous amount of background as a previous military vet. But definitely excited for this one. A lot of healthy takeaways, and I think that there's a lot here to unpack that folks listening to our channel can implement in their daily lives to leave them off a little bit better than we found them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jeff, what you got in the cup this morning? I see it's not the cup that heats itself. So
that's right.
A little dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. My battery's dead on my internet connected coffee mug. So I had to stick with it, but donut shop blend. So the local Aldi favorite. It seems like everything is going up in price. So and now it's not. It's shrinking what my paycheck can afford.
That's an amazing invention, the coffee mug that you were talking about.
He usually has a French press, but I think he's slacking a little bit this morning.
I'm trying to slow down the intake. Usually about 3 cups is the tip top for me. What about yourselves? What do you guys have in the cup? And first of all, coffee cup cheers as well. Absolutely. What's in your cup, Eric?
Your basic coffee, sugar, and a little bit of beta aniline, and foamed up half and half.
I love it. Yeah, Greg will tell you about mud water. What's mud water, Greg?
Yeah, I transitioned to mud water kind of late last year. I was drinking, probably 2 cups of coffee a day. And I found at like 1 o'clock, I was crashing, and it was either drink another cup of coffee. I would try to exercise, which after the exercise, I would basically crash after that because the caffeine kind of had me, on this even level. I would wake up, drink the caffeine, exercise, I'd be on this great level, and then I'd crash around, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And I had to decide either drink another cup of coffee, which prevented me from sleeping, or try to transition to something of lower caffeine, maybe some natural derivatives of different types of vitamins to be blended up and kind of still get that coffee feeling, that warmth, the healthy taste, things of that nature. But just trying something new. I think we all go kind of through our lives, and I've been drinking coffee for probably since before I can remember. Probably walking around and took the baby bottle, and I was like, hey, I want a cup of coffee on the side of that. So I've been drinking it for a while, and just decided that I was at a point of life where try to switch up some of my habits and routines and see how it can help me elevate kind of the path that I'm on. So mud water's got a little bit of reishi mushroom. It's got a couple of different turmerics, things of that nature. It's a tea derivative, so they usually have like some type of ginger tea or something of that nature, and they kind of blend it all up, and you put it in some hot water, and it basically looks like mud water. And the thing about it is a lot of it gets to the bottom, and that's the thing that differentiates it from coffee is you don't get those grounds on the bottom, which some people may be like, this is gross, but you get that 10 to 12 sips of what I look at as pretty delicious stuff. It still gives you the caffeine boost, but it doesn't give me the crash later on down the road. So that's what I have in my cup this morning. It's tasting good. It's a rainy day here, so a warm cup of anything is appetizing for me. So
yeah, Greg, those herbs in that coffee are really helpful for exactly what you're saying. So
the first thing I asked Greg is, does it still taste like coffee? And he was like, mostly, until you get to the bottom. So that's the one thing I'm not looking forward to when he has me placing my first order. But without further ado, just figured we'd set the stage. Eric Like I said, tremendous background, written quite a few books. I'm still working on my first one alongside Greg. With that being said, he's looking for his next opportunity. So if you find value in this discussion, a lot of stuff he brings to the table, he's looking for that next role. So reach out to him. You can find him on LinkedIn, and we'll drop that in the chat towards the end of this conversation. But just a brief bio on Eric. So Eric Infanti is a former United States Marine Corps vet, 10 times, author. He's the author of Marine on the Mat and Breath Becomes Life, Yoga and the Martial Way, and Mindfulness and Yin Yoga. Eric's passion to help the overall veteran support community is much needed. He's looking to provide them relief and healing to veterans, especially those suffering with PTSD. This is built upon a holistic and integrated approach of mindfulness, mental focusing, and yoga meditation combined with movement, which is proven to bring the human psychology and psycho-spiritual back to wholeness and onefulness. Eric is also a certified Scrum Master, having 10 years in IT and design. He's a contemporary designer, has worked in a myriad of industries to include both aerospace, manufacturing, medicine, insurance, and others, working along even small size businesses. Ever since the Marine Corps, he's integrated his spiritual process into both tech and design process. Eric also holds both a master's degree in Buddhist psychology and a second master's degree, and you're going to have to help me out with this, Eric, Uvendic medicine. Eric is working on oil arts, painting, abstract expressionism, photography, and sumi. He's also studying with India's foremost scholar in Mysore, learning both Mysore and Tangier style painting. That's a lot. It's a tongue twister. Quite a few credentials there. Without further ado, welcome Eric Infanti to the show. We appreciate you joining us.
Jeff, my absolute pleasure. And Greg, thank you very much. And that's Ayurvedic medicine, just so I can get that word pronounced proper for us all. Yeah, that's India's system of medicine.
Very much appreciated on that. So, I guess I want to unpack here. You spent many years in the United States. First of all, appreciate your service and everything you've done to protect our homeland, our loved ones, each and every day. Having that Marine Corps experience, give us a couple of key themes that you've learned, starting off the conversation and your time in the military.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is esprit de corps. So you immediately have a brother and sisterhood from day one. You're thrown onto yellow footprints the first night right off the bus, and you are immediately a unit. That is teamwork from the moment you begin. And you're not instructed that. You can't be taught that. It is just simply instilled inside of you. So we have power in supporting one another is what that means. And being a force, a voice for the people who aren't. And so that right from the get-go is what I refer to as servant leadership, which is another thing that's taught right inside of Scrum, servant leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that we kind of preach from the rooftop here, serving others from the front, right? And providing that example that they need to grow, and leaning into where you can help them in various points of not only their professional, but their personal lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have always felt that both of those lives are very integrated. They're not separate lives. They're integrated lives. Your work life and your home life is an integrated ecosystem all in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you'll have to real quick. We were asking about that painting in the back. What's that represent?
Yeah. So overall, my paintings typically come from images of the Hindu or Buddhist deities, and anything that's coming through me is, I know it sounds hocus pocus to a lot of people, but all of my inspiration, a lot of my writings, if it's not research based, it's all coming out of the meditative experience. So once I am in that meditative experience, I start to have visions of what to create, what to produce. And then therefore I got to find a way to translate that into our consciousness, our human mind, and either get that into words or get that into in art form. So this is another thing that I've received in a vision, and it's going to represent, a journey. That's simply what it is. So it's going to be a journey.
Wow. Yeah, no, incredible background. You are uniquely you. Nobody is the same Eric. I think that's what, makes us all unique, being able to have unique, visualizations to bring creativity to the world, right? I think we're all doing something that is art at the end of the day, even if you're, working for a, corporate company, doing things for them, whatever you deliver on a daily basis is art. And if you can connect to it in that way and it makes you tick and gets you to be excited about what you're doing, I think that is fulfillment. And that's the ability to, live your best life. So I love that you're, living on that level. I'm sure your experience has kind of brought you to today where you're able to have those expressions. Just back to servant leadership a little bit. I think, one of the things you pointed out is, kind of doing things for your team and potentially not expecting anything back. I think a lot of times in today's world with the social media aspect, it's always, post something or put something out in the world and it always expects something back. And I think that's what servant leadership is to me, where you put yourself into that other person, asking how they are as a person, not, what are they looking to accomplish for work necessarily, but what makes them tick as a person. And then that spans across, personal and professional. And that's, what I've seen as, really quality servant leaders that I've come in contact with that have allowed me to become the person that I am today and continue to strive to be a better leader each day here at Valor. So this is going to be a fascinating discussion. I don't think that mentality, mental health, the ability to consciously shape your beliefs are talked about enough in this space. It's very, I want to get a position and here's how it is, as opposed to here are the beliefs that I have that make me uniquely qualified, or the experiences that I've had that make me uniquely qualified to get this type of role. So I think it's going to be fascinating to kind of dive into the mental side, some of the things that you've learned up to this point, going from the Marines to going, through the education you've gone through. I mean, you have an incredible amount of experience on the IT side. People should be giving you job offers as opposed to you going out and asking companies to hire you. They should be coming after you. So looking forward to highlighting some of that. But just from a, I kind of look at, either it's a month or a year as kind of a season, because I was a baseball player. So we all go through kind of different seasons. And obviously at the beginning of the 2000s, you went through, a critical season for you. What kind of, season was it for you to get into the Marines, to go through that experience? And then kind of what season would you say you're in now, and the things that you're kind of prioritizing in your kind of spiritual or personal journey?
Yeah,
Each day?
absolutely. Yeah, Greg, thank you for the question. So what prompted me going to the Marines? Well, I wanted a major life change when I was, 19, 20 years old. I just needed to, finally grow up and find my initial path. And I walked into the recruiting station where all 4 or 5 of the services were. Nobody was there except for the Marine recruiter, and that gentleman stepped out the doorway like, bam, I'm like, I want that. Whatever he's got, I want that. There was just something about his presence. And that was it. There was nothing else to do. Take the ASVAB again, all these, the routine that you have to go through. But whatever I saw in the Marines, I didn't see in the other services. I just saw something different. I just saw something in myself already. And so it was a natural fit. It was. And I wasn't, I was still unique in the Marines, as you can probably tell. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that tour very, very much. And they gave me a lot of opportunities to do a lot of things that I would, no one gets to do unless you are that, and the brotherhood and the sisterhood that I've talked about earlier, that is strong. That is strong.
Eric, what was your first, experience that, after the ASVAB, going to boot camp, things of that nature? Was that a testing period of battling failure and being able to kind of push through it? Or was it relatively, easy at the beginning and got harder and harder? Or was it a shock right at the beginning when you got in?
Yeah, moment one was shock and awe. Absolutely. Moment one. And I say it, all the time. Day one, everyone receives, to a degree, PTSD on day one. It's because you've never had that experience before in your whole life. Never. Progressively harder, I would say absolutely. You're pretty fatigued throughout the whole thing, but you're learning enormous amounts of information every single day, and you are active all day long. And the things that you're taught inside, any military branch, it's intense. It's intense. So yeah.
Eric, what would you say your biggest hurdle that you encountered, over your 10-year period of the Marine Corps?
I think the biggest hurdle was to learn not to be an individual, to always be for and rely upon your team equally. You're doing this together. That's the biggest thing. And we don't have that so much out in the world. And that's why when people get out of their military tour, they're like, where is everybody? Where are my brothers and sisters? Right? They don't have that potentially from their family like they had in the service. And that's why there's a little bit of what's going on here now, right? Because there's a big gap there. There's usually a loss of that,
Yeah, driving back to that community element, folks that get out, are getting ready to get out, are really seeking that kind of belonging, that community, that culture, that leadership environment. One of the things that we've found valuable in the community that we've been a strong proponent of is the Honors Foundation. Many people listening to us have heard of it. We were actually at an Honors Foundation meeting last night. But we see many folks in the same seat, whether the special forces individuals, people being on ships, people being on the combat battlefield, and they're struggling with many of the things that you've encountered in terms of hurdles. So, I guess you could say there's additional comfort in knowing that you're not the only one, and finding creative outlets to band together, which I think is a good way to segment to what we talked about before, is about post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a lot of folks that have encountered traumatic events in their life, whether it be losing a loved one, or things in the military, things that they've seen in a kind of first responder type capacity. To the folks out there listening, what are a couple of approaches to these life-altering, life-traumatic incidents and events that they can implement in their life to leave them a little bit better off?
Yeah, Jeff, that's so key. And the first thing is, what is your support structure? Because when you leave the service, it's changed, right? We have global communications now, but you probably don't have the face contact that you did all day, every day, right? So it's putting your new tribe into place. Who is that for you, right? It's challenging to a lot of people, because when people get out, sometimes they end up in a mental vortex and they just want to isolate themselves. So that's the first thing. Don't isolate yourselves. Put together your support team. That is key. Friends, family, whoever, professionals, put together your support team. That's the very first thing. And can I trust these people? Can I rely upon these people? Right? If we don't have that, we're going to be more isolated than we ever were. And then it requires a bit of an inertia from the self to reach out and say, hey, will you be here for me? Like you're used to in the service. You're used to that. And people have relied upon you for very intense situations. So we might be in the intense situation, but we might feel that it still is. But is your support system able to handle that? If not, you need to get a new support system, and not blame a family member or a friend because they don't have the capacity or the knowledge or even the interest to be there to the degree that you need. So you have to weave through and continue to find who your support system is. And then accountability partners are different than that support system. So if you're having a rough day, do you have an accountability partner to just talk to without needing any, solutions put there? Just to, just to be there for you, to hold space, right? And then if you need an accountability partner to, get that workout in, right, that you were talking about in the afternoons, right? Did you do it? Or 10 minutes prior, text one another. All right, let's get this workout in, right? You had your awesome mud water. Now let's get a HIIT in or get a run in, something, whatever it is, right? So you need accountability partners to support the micro things, the atomic habits, the micro habits you got throughout the day, right? That I find extremely useful, right? For some of us, it's like we don't have time. That's the whole thing. We keep on saying to ourselves, we keep on saying to everybody else, it's not even proper language to say we don't have time. What is your priority of the day? Not the time, issue of the day, right? And so time blocking is an important thing as well. So taking a 2, 3, 4 hour time block, yeah, we got to get the work done of the day. But can you take 15 minutes and do something different? Can you get some stretching in? Can you get some breathing in? Can you get your workout in 20 minutes? Whatever it is, time block yourself where inside of a 2, 3, 4 hour window that you're doing some sort of self-care along the way, right? Yeah. So those are some of the things that I found very, very helpful. And then it comes down to what is next. Well, what's your drive? What's your passion? What's your modality, your technique, your method, right? Is it a power walk for some of us versus, training for the Ironman for others, right? So you got to find out what it is that works for you. Thousands and thousands of modalities, methods, and techniques are out there. So it's about digging into yourself and about digging into what is available to you in the world. We have, again, global communications. We can find things in resources to help us along. If not, get a coach, get a coach to help you. But we need to find a thing that we are passionate about and that works for our mental stability, our emotional stability, our spiritual stability, as well as our body, right? Whatever that structure is, work out, stretch, breathe, whatever it is, we need to continue to dig to find out what that is sometimes. It takes an inertia. It does. It takes a discovery. It does, right? I've tried hundreds of things before I found yoga, breathing, Ayurvedic medicine, and that was a big, big force for me. So later on, I found, well, what's a kettlebell? That works for me. Doesn't work for everybody. Some people just like barbells, dumbbells. Some people like treadmills. Kettlebells worked for me. Later on, the club bell came out. Later on, the steel mace came out. Then I found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then I found Muay Thai kickboxing. So you just continue to discover what works for you. I'm saying these things because these things worked well for me, but the hundreds of other things I'm not mentioning because they didn't work for me. So they just dropped off of my radar, right?
Yeah,
and it's not just in one day. It takes time. It takes seriously a noble warrior's heart to go through this, an open and creative mind. And the biggest thing is consistency. Yeah. Don't give up on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of goodness there. I think that, the folks out there are concerned about, saying that I'm not okay. Right. Many folks are dealing with mental health issues and bringing that to the forefront of the conversation. I know, especially in men's health, that's kind of a stigma in many cases, that they're kind of designed to hold down the home front, and making those individuals available to discuss that is something that people are dealing with on a daily basis. We get so focused on our business life and making a living that we forget in many cases about that kind of restorative medicine, whatever that is, your modality that you mentioned, to implement, self-care and healing.
Yeah, we sometimes forget to make a life, right? We make a living, but we forget to make a life. Eric, there's a lot to unpack in those points. Having a support system, accountability partner, having the right habits and routines. I recently listened to James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, and he was actually a baseball player as well. And he went through kind of a similar transition from the minor leagues, and basically, got out and didn't know what he was going to do. And, his thing was, I need to go back to my routine. I need to, figure out how to make my habits consciously, and then my habits will make me. Because when you're, doing something, whether you're in the military or playing baseball, you have these consistent habits you're doing every day that are either set by you or set by a leader that you're, working for or with. So I think it's, it shakes everybody up, and you have to consciously say, I need to do self-care. I need to do, I need to exercise. I need to, go out for a walk. Because I think a lot of the times, and something that's been kind of on my radar probably over the last 6 months or so, is just understanding how our dopamine works in our body. And, are we just chasing dopamine all day by, eating chips and, sitting and watching TV, playing video games? All that stuff is not bad in moderation, but you have to understand what that's doing to your brain, what that's doing to your body, because that's going to really shape your habits, because your brain is so powerful that it controls what your body does. And I think a lot of times we think about it opposite, where, we put our hand out and really that's, our body controlling what we do and what we think. But, it's really the opposite. I think when it comes to these activities and having that transition, I think being able to, like you said, not isolate yourself, but being able to get back out there and put yourself out there to fail. And then you learn lessons. Like you mentioned, you've tried 100 different things. I think we've all kind of tried things, but how many things have we tried, and how many times have we put ourselves out there to potentially say, that's not right for me? Sometimes it's more important to understand what's not right for you than what's actually right. And that helps you have the process of elimination, which it sounds like that's exactly, what you've done up to this point, which is fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we sometimes work through deduction, so it's a good way to work.
Yeah, Greg, we had a question in the chat here. LinkedIn user, what resources, Eric, do you recommend for meditation?
Yep. So that's not the easiest answer to a very simple question, but I'll do my best here. The biggest thing that I've seen out in the meditation communities is a lot of them are just pretty strict, and they say, okay, sit down, close your mouth. That's it. And that's not humane to do that, right? We're not wired to do nothing and then sit down, be quiet, and then try to get into a meditative state. That doesn't work. Too strict, right? Too strict. So my suggestions were John Kabat-Zinn started the whole mindfulness meditation thing. Remarkable human, remarkable teacher. His work is profound, and mindfulness is something that we all need every single day, right? How to be mindful as to the intentions and the work that we're doing, right? Without being distracted in 10,000 directions. The other thing is the insight meditation communities have done remarkable work with insight meditation as a form, as a modality. So Googling insight meditation and finding, Jack Kornfield and Sharon Salzberg, and these would be wonderful places to begin, to read, to YouTube, to try, right? But my biggest advice is to try to find a small, short movement modality. Doesn't even need a label. Get the physical jitters out before you start to go into a meditation. A lot of us in the beginning need a guided meditation to, get us moving in that direction. In the beginning, we need that. So I hope that's been helpful. I can go on with that answer for probably another hour and a half, but we'll keep that at that place, and hopefully the person asking that is taking some notes.
Yeah, and hopefully they're able to connect with you as well.
Absolutely.
We'll drop that information in the chat.
Absolutely.
Knowing you in the short period of time, I know that you're happy to be a vessel and a resource for folks, that you may not know across the internet. That's just the matter of fact of how life is, that we have to reach out to folks who may not know, and they may need to be that guiding light for that next step in the process in our journey.
Yeah, I'm happy to get on a Zoom or on a phone or on a text with anyone who needs any support at any time. Anytime. And I'm also a veterati mentor. So anyone who's a veteran can request my time there as well, which is, those are hour-long phone calls. So But you don't have to be a veteran to request my time. So I'm happy to be a source for anyone who needs help in any way in life.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to grab that link and share that as well.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting, Eric. You mentioned the movement modality before meditation. I think, for me, I get most benefit from meditation after, I like to do hot yoga, but any yoga practice, when I am finished up with that practice, that's when I have my best meditation, because in my mind, I've already, kind of worked through the exercise I wanted to achieve. If I wake up in the morning and I, am laying in bed or, sitting somewhere and trying to meditate, my mind starts to think about, hey, I need to go, get some exercise in, or I need to, go eat. So my brain's racing. But after I do that, those activities, it really has a peaceful effect on me. I think that's important for anybody, especially in the tech space, because we are looking at a screen and have all these tabs open. We're going through all these different data points. If you don't have a meditation practice of some sort, even if it's 3 minutes of just like sitting outside and just kind of closing your eyes for a minute to kind of just ground yourself, I think that's of vital importance. It doesn't need to be 20 minutes, it doesn't need to be an hour. So right. just some thoughts to keep in mind for the folks asking that question from that standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, you brought up an important thing. I don't want to label it and call it yoga for the anti-yoga people, but any movement modality works. Yoga obviously is prime. It's popular enough in Western cultures. We know what it is. It's on yoga commercials. It's everywhere in our society now. So, but to say, the question would be to ourselves all the time is, what is it that drops us into a brief moment of stillness? That's it. So whatever that is, it is, so yoga obviously is prime for that, because it's the pathway into meditation, literally in its structure as well as in its doctrine. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jeff and I always mention, questions are the best answers, whether it's personal life, relationships, professional life, work, everything that we do on a daily basis. I'd be curious, you're very self-conscious of, you think through things, you ask questions to yourself internally and inflect. What would you say are a few of the biggest questions you've asked yourself around, that have really helped elevate you in your mental journey? As you've kind of navigated things, what are the biggest questions that come to your mind that really helped you find the answers that you were looking for, or are currently looking for?
Yeah, some of the biggest questions that I continue to ask myself, and I structure it in this way. So I like to refer to it as open inquiry. And so those two words mean we're never going to have the end answer to it, right? So it's an open inquiry that's going to be continually asked, and the answer might shape shift and change its colors and change its size and shape as we move along in life, right? So, and that's one of the biggest things is I kept asking myself is, what can bring me into a still space? Because I know that there's magic going on in that still space. And you're so right, Greg. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes or an hour. It can absolutely be a short time, right? And, nature walks are great, meditations, as long as we don't have our phone in our hand, So again, it's those micro habits to, okay, what can give me that? And, without a distraction, that's the biggest thing in mindfulness. So, and then the other, the other biggest questions that I've asked myself are things around not necessarily going back or forward in time, but mindfulness meditation teaches present moment awareness. And that's a big thing where our society is so fast and moving in so many different directions, a lot of times at one time, that we can't just focus in on one thing. So it's challenging.
And I think that's increasingly difficult with all the notifications, the pings, the messages. We are a society of being connected to information and people from a wristwatch or a telephone away. Their goal and the design of those platforms is to keep you engaged. And through that engagement is taking your attention away from, that mindfulness aspect.
So true. So true. Here's a good short story. I was teaching literally John Kabat-Zinn's method of mindfulness meditation, on stage to up to 200 people. The age demographic to these wonderful, wonderful souls, 70s, 80s, 90s, even in their 90s, they came for this, right? So, and it was split up pretty well. There was a little bit of a slideshow. Then we go into a practice. Then we go into Q&A. Little show, give them some information. We go into a practice. Then we go into Q&A. And that was their format. That's what I designed for them. So this age demographic was hungry for this moment of stillness because they found peace inside of it. Picture it, 70s, 80s, 90s, every one of them have a clinical issue going on, right? Every one of them has a loved one going through a clinical issue, right? Or worse, if you know what I'm saying, right? So they're grieving, so they're just finding a mental space where there's really not much going on in there, right? So they were hungry for that, and they didn't have that. Obviously, they didn't grow up with, the wave of metaphysical modalities like we do here. And I asked the question: how many of you have the phone an arm's distance away from you while sleeping? They didn't even understand why I was asking the question, right? And of course, no one answered with a yes, right? Picture that. They never grew up like that. They never knew what that is. They all have phones. They all have the new iPhone or whatever it is, right? So it's not that they don't have it, but they don't sleep with it in an arm's distance away. So they're not dinged in the middle of the night with some sort of vibration or even, just your mind on that device, Yeah, very interesting to work with that demographic inside of this kind of frame of meditation.
Yeah, it's tremendous. Even, that demographic that's, longing for additional ways to help navigate this new digital space. And I think many of them, weren't used to experiences maybe growing up in their life, right? The folks that were born in 1990 on up, that was the way of life, is being connected through digital technologies. They're great, but they pull us away and many times from, ways that we want to grow beyond the business realm, right? One thing that I heard that has helped me is that, establish a time to, turn notifications off. Maybe that's leaving your phone outside your bedroom, to instill or, kind of towards that restful state, to begin towards getting a normalized sleep cycle, what have you. I'm interested here in, we say we wake up in the morning, Greg and I chat, how you doing this morning? Well, woke up, put my feet on the ground. I like to walk barefoot many times, right? And I don't know all the ins and outs of the medical applications of that, but is there something about grounding yourself? We always talking about being grounded, right? But if you physically ground yourself to the earth, what does that do to your body based on your experiences?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the body. I mean, the body is the vessel for everything else. And so I like to look at the human being inside of a layered system, right? So we have the physical structure, we have the body, the organs, and everything that we are pretty well aware of, right? But beyond that, inside of that layered structure of being a human, we have an energetic body, which gets woo-woo for a lot of people, I'm sure, right? So, but that's my frame, so that's what I'm going to speak of. So we have an energy body, we have an emotional body, we also have an intellect. We got this thing. So between the ears, when used proper, without so much ego, yeah. And then we also have a spiritual being, right? So we have these 5 layers that we are working with from my frame, and so it's really the other layers that you're bringing through the physical body to get grounded, because the body's here. It's a pretty dense vessel. The earth is a pretty dense planet, and so the body's actually here, but it's the other 4 bodies from my frame that we're trying to get through the physical layer to ground, and we're not so fragmented in the mind, and we're not so kind of spacey, right? Or just disheveled. It's a rooting, literally, right? It's a rooting, but it's the other bodies through the physical that we're trying to get grounded, right? So that's for me a very important distinction. We want to ground the totality of who we are by stomping the feet on the ground. That's an old shaman technique, to stomp the feet on the ground. So that's a wonderful way to do that, to root into the earth, so we can feel more connected, not only to ourselves, but to the earth, and then to the others around us.
Yeah, that's incredible insight. The five bodies, looking at your own being, your own self in that nature. Do you ever think those five bodies sleep at once? We talk about the power of sleep and that we all need sleep. Our bodies sleep, but does our intellect, our brain, our spiritual self, do you think those ever sleep as one? We're none of us are going to make it out alive at the end of the day, but I think do you ever get that full rest, or are they always fighting against each other when you're laying down in bed and really trying to shut everything down for a little bit just to kind of rest, so that you're rejuvenated for those five bodies to kind of bring their best to the next day?
Yeah, in my experience, fighting insomnia on and off for decades, and then supporting a lot of other people through it as well. I don't think they're all fighting with one another, but it's my belief that the mind is the most challenging thing to let rest, and it's either through an anxiety, a fear of something unconscious or conscious, where it just doesn't seem to be settled. It just doesn't seem to settle. That's the intellect. So the other bodies, I don't feel have too much of an interplay with that, from my experience. But the mind seems to be very, very challenged to get into stillness and or get into a space of rest. And we can't turn, at least in our waking moments, we just can't turn this train off. It's a thought train that just never ends, right? And for those meditators, right, who say, "We'll turn the mind off," well, that's not even a possibility. We're not made that way, right? It's just not a possibility. But what we could do is we can slow that train down a little bit, right? And we can feel more ease, right? That can happen. And then another thought that follows, there's a little bit of a gap, right? So it's the gap in between the thoughts that we can start to increase that gap a little bit. Then we're making some serious headway. And that's the whole premise to this whole holistic lifestyle that I've found and lived by. I know that if I'm meditating in some way, I'm simply going to feel better, make better decisions.
Yeah, I think that your internal world creates your external world. I'm a huge believer of that. There's a lot of things going on around us, but our mind really shapes how we interact with that world. The uncontrollables versus the controllables. I'm a huge believer of that. I was on a kind of a group community session with somebody named Josh Lifrak, and he's a mental skills coach. And one of the things that was brought up is the mind is so powerful. We have to train the mind just as much as we train the body. We all when before we train the body, as athletes, I'm sure this happens in the military as well. They teach you about how the body works, the mechanics of it. Your bicep is connected to this, but we don't talk enough about how the mind is structured. We know input of information and output. That's really, and then you hear the hippocampus, and there's different areas of the brain. But is there something through your training that you've seen where they've really kind of explained how the mind works? Because when you understand how it's structured, how it processes things, then you can really start to train it in a way that's going to benefit you and those around you at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to go into a cliche, because we hear a lot in the yoga classes or in our spiritual environments, the mind, body, spirit connection, right? And for me, not going into the dissection or the compartments of the brain, for me, that is the most critical thing, right? The mind, body, spirit connection. Because if you're not doing things from a sense of soul, then why are we doing that at all, right? And if we're not connecting the body with the mind, and you brought up like athletes, this is an important distinction right here for sure. So, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I've been practicing for a long time, way too long, but I'm still practicing at my mature age. It's a martial combat, right? So I'm a combat athlete still, and if you're not connected to that triad that I just mentioned, you're going to be tapped out pretty quick, or you're going to gas out, which is another way of tapping out, right? So, in fact, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we call it the game of human chess, because you need to be in that very precious single moment in time, right? Because you have to be fully aware of what you're doing with an opponent who's trying to tap you out through a choke or a joint lock, right? And if you're not fully conscious and aware, you're going to miss it. And at the same time, you need to be already prepared physically and mentally. That's why we train. That's why we drill 2, 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. You want to have that little micro plan in place until something shifts, then you need another micro plan in place. And then something shifts, you need another micro plan in place, right? So that type of triad, mind, body, spiritually, all intertwined into things of that nature, are going to be a critical moment. Any athlete knows this. Any tactical operator knows this.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're not prepared in something like jiu-jitsu or MMA, you and everybody around knows it, because you get knocked out, or you get put on the floor, and you have to make small adaptations in such a micro time frame. But in your own mind, body, spirit connection, that could be multiple periods of time, because everything slows down. You're in a period where you have multiple plans and you're kind of seeing things. So just the power of the mind, the power to prepare your mind to take on the obstacle you're about to face. I think that's a 75% of the battle. We could debate on the percentage, but I think that preparation sets you up to perform in that moment, and then you make small adaptations in real time. I think that's something that is underlooked in a lot of those sports, is the preparation that goes into it, not just body, mind and spirit as well. So fascinating.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. And I just want to make one thing more clear to everyone. Anyone who puts on the outfit, anyone who puts on socks and shoes and goes for a walk or does anything is an athlete, right? Functional. We are functional athletes, right? We don't have to be a pro anything to be an athlete, right? So we can all have that experience. We can all have that, the runner's high that we used to say way back in the 80s, right? We can all have that experience, right? So anyone who puts on shoes and an outfit of any kind, and even just goes for a walk and has that mind-body connection, is an athlete. So I just want to make sure that I'm not referring to athletes on a pro level. Right?
Yeah. Yep. I think it's, at the end of the day, it's a title and an experience. When people say, like, college athlete, high school athlete, professional athlete, it's really a title and experience that you're able to be put through at the end of the day. But I was on a podcast recently, and we were talking about how everybody in the business world is a mental athlete, but they may not look at their body and spirit as a part of that athleticism. So it's fascinating how you see the connection and how you're able to clearly translate it, and be able to break down helping people use their mind as a cooperating force, as opposed to something that's being fought against, which I think majority of people have periods where we're fighting against it, and that period continues and trickles in to many years. So I think once you recognize that you can shape it, that's a huge enlightenment moment. I know it's been for me, but for anybody that goes through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, rounding out the conversation here. What you're looking to get in that next role in cybersecurity, right? So, what does security mean to you as a person, Eric? And how do you think that can be leveraged to better protect those around you, your loved ones, and the extension of that team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've obviously learned a lot firsthand as to what security is. Anyone in the military is an expert at security to some degree or another, regardless of what your MOS is, your job duties, roles. It doesn't matter. We all know what security is because that's why we're there, to protect, defend in the ways that we do. So Marines especially we know this so intimately, right? But I would say security is first inside the self, right? Valor as an example. You two gentlemen as an example. Your purpose here right now on the planet, anyways, is valor. And what is your mission? To protect and defend, right? So it is inside of yourself that you are this, right? You wake up every day to go do this. But not every human has that intention at all. It's you are there to help us other people who are vulnerable from the people who don't have that instilled inside of them, right? So the cyber terrorist, right? So what is inside their head that they feel fully appropriate to go ahead and hurt other human beings? You know, they have that, we don't have that, right? So what brought them to that point, right? So what is the psychology of the human being that allows them to feel that this is okay, right? Or whatever position that they are in. So it starts inside of ourselves and how we live and how we see ourselves in the highest degree of human integrity that we can, even imagine, right? And this is why I'm so passionate about threat psychology. I got a degree in Buddhist psychology, which is to a big degree, peaceful. But what is the other side of that, right? What is the other side of that light, And what motivates a terrorist to go do horrific things, right? Why are they in that position to do that? So it starts within and then emits outward. And then from my view, we talked about the 5 layers of that human being. Security is inside every single one of those layers as well. If we're not spiritually inside of that integrity, then can we be swayed to the other side, right? And do we have that mental awareness? Do we have that structure put in place? Most of us know security through the physical layer, right? That's where we live, right? And whether that's technology or with your body, with your hands, with force, right? With a whole unit of force, right? With big ships and equipment with force, right? So we understand security at that level, at that layer, but it always comes back to the motivation of the human psychology, right? It comes back right to that. So. And then, we, in my view, and I'm so honored and privileged to, have the Marine Corps experience as well as, hand-to-hand combat experience through Muay Thai kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. So, to be able to protect ourselves at that physical layer, to protect our families at that physical layer, and are we able to protect a community? And can we get that brother and sisterhood back into a community if we ever had that need, to rally up in numbers to protect our micro community? And so the events of February of last year kind of brought to surface to me the survivalist mentality, right? The prepper mentality, right? Are we prepared? And that's the question. So when February of 2022, last year happened, a Marine friend of mine called me, and he says, "Look what's going on in the world." I'm like, "Yeah, I see it. And are you prepared?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean, right? Do you have home security set up? Do you have physical security set up, right? Do you have cybersecurity set up in your home, in your small office, right?" So I started to think about, okay, where are my perimeters in life, right? And I started to establish that to the degree that I could, So that's my stance on security. I hope that's helpful and informational enough for you.
Yeah, I think it's a very holistic approach. It's not a one size fits all. We've talked about some common themes about connecting the mind, body, spirit, looking at our lives, our livelihood. But security has many different facets from that, right? Protecting your household, that's physically, the information that they use that's digitally, the financial security, right? There's a lot of uncertainties in the world, but making that plan for the uncertainties to help you navigate as much as possible. So, tremendous answer. And I very much appreciate how you've layered that and how are you utilizing that in your daily life. It's been a tremendous conversation, Eric. We'd love to have you back on the show. Where can folks find you? We know that you're on the variety of platform for kind of consulting and coaching. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place. So it's simply my first and last name together. So I made the URL very, very simple. So Eric Infanti, that's it.
Perfect. And any employers out there, what's your ideal role you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. A leadership role utilizing Scrum, Agile methodologies. So that's my role next. That's coming. So I'd be thrilled to help out a company that has that need.
Perfect. Any particular niche? Are you looking to work in a, offensive security pen testing type shop, a security software type shop? Any particular domain or role that you would, like to target right now?
Not necessarily domain or role, and certainly not necessarily an industry either. Not necessarily anywhere geographically, dependent. So that role that I just described is what I'm passionate about, and fits me. It fits me extraordinarily well, and I'm very good at it. So as long as it's IT cyber to some degree, I'm thrilled. Does it have to be? Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there's anything that you can teach. You can teach somebody anything, but you can't teach passion and heart. And I think that that's one of the core elements that you bring to the table. I mean, I was floored to see your mission statement, that you took the time to really dive into yourself, what drives you, what motivates you, and what you're seeking through those experiences to date, and how you can bring that to the table to an employer to add business value.
Absolutely.
Great conversation. Definitely. I know Simon Lindstead. Appreciate all the things that you and the InfoSec Live community are doing. So Simon said directly to reach out to him. He's working alongside a team at Jobs and Cyber. So definitely recommend you reach out, connect with him, and see where that might take you on that next step. Typically like to end these conversations with a kind of an intriguing question. So my question to you, Eric, as we end the discussion is, if you could have dinner with 3 people anywhere in the world, who would it be and why?
Well, the first person would obviously be my partner. So she's a wonderful person to have dinner with. So she always comes first. And then my 6-year-old son, I would love to have dinner with him. I always do. And then I would say my adult daughter. Yeah, those are the 3 first people. If you had a number 4 in your loop there, I would say probably Elon Musk. So in space, dinner in space, right?
Yeah. They that's a good one. You might see a car floating around you if it ever comes back around the globe. But yeah, family. I mean, we're big about that, family first, right? Family is centric. We're people centric over here. So anytime Greg and I or people that we've worked alongside with said, "Hey, I got a family emergency," we get it. Family comes first. So that very much resonates with us. So again, thank you so much for the time, the impactful words that you've driven in this conversation, some of the approaches that have been meaningful to you, and how that might be able to be applied to folks dealing with traumatic or just life in general. So definitely encourage folks to reach out. Thank you again from Greg and I for everything that you've done and continue to do for folks out there. And leave the discussion here is that make it your day to make somebody else's day better. So with that, gentlemen, I bid you adieu. Go into this weekend. Stay safe, stay secure, and reach out to help others. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you. My pleasure.